Story 1. Wedding photographer here. They said they were influencers with a great following and that they would promote me, but when I asked for their online handle, there was silence. I get this a lot as I'm fairly well known, so I'm an easy target when people look for exposure. Exposure? People die from exposure. Story 2. I've been a wedding photographer for 12 years. I routinely get asked to do entire weddings for free, not even always from Instagram influencers. One time, this guy, whom I didn't even like that much, asked me to do a wedding for free for his friend, someone I didn't even know existed until this interaction. I just imagine walking into a restaurant and asking for the absolute best meal they have for $0 and then telling them it will be good for their business to do so. Story 3. I had a client ask me to Photoshop his head onto another guy's body because he liked the shirt the other guy was wearing more than his own. I actually did it because it was hilarious and he paid me for it. Story 4. Had someone asked me to do a videography shoot of their new house being built. They said $200, but they wanted me to go each weekend for 2 years and shoot it to build up a time lapse and stuff. I definitely said no. Story 5. A bald guy asked me to Photoshop veins on his head to make it look like a giant penis. He was some kind of businessman who was selling an audiobook. Story 6. Not a photographer, but I sell rocks such as crystals, obelisks, and palm stones to fund a small animal sanctuary. I've been asked by a few people to borrow my inventory of rocks for photo shoots. None of them offered to pay and wanted me to transport 1,000 pounds of rocks to their location and set them all up out of the kindness of my heart. I would have accepted $50 or $100 for an entire day's shoot, to be honest, but really? Story 7. The influencer asked me to shoot, and before I even had the chance to give her my prices, she decided to give me hers. Over $300 for me to shoot with her for 30 minutes. One of her main selling points was that she could teach me how to leverage and grow my social media. The girl was 15. To clarify, she was asking me to pay her over $300 when, in reality, at a minimum, she should be paying me. I don't even charge that much. Haha. Story 8. Had a girl contact me to do a suicide girl's photo shoot. I gave her my rates and she got back with, "Oh, I don't have that much. Isn't it enough that you'd see my breasts?" Story 9. As a photo assistant in Chicago, I had a friend tell me there was a popular New York photographer looking for an assistant on Instagram for a shoot in Chicago. I inquired with the gentleman, and he said he only had a day rate of $150. On top of that, he said the day would be a 14-hour day, and he asked me to pick up his equipment rental, which included a 12-foot sweep, and store it at my place to be ready for the shoot the next day. Kilno. $150 for 17 hours worth of work? I do not care which photographer you are. Pay your assistants correctly. Story 10. Some influencer was promoting beignets in beets as a healthy diet. She wanted me to take images of the color-changed poop, stating that this is actually normal for those who can't process the beignets. That week, my digital single-lens reflex camera was dropped hard, and now I am without it. It was a bad week. Story 11. Had an influencer try to set up a shoot with me. When I mentioned my price, she was shocked because she was under the assumption that I was going to pay her for some reason. Story 12. A few years back, I was in Acadia National Park, and we did the Beehive Trail hike. For those unfamiliar, it's basically as close to rock climbing as you can get without a harness, as you are going straight up a cliff on iron rungs, so it's super fun, and you are rewarded with an amazing view at the top. Most people take a quick snap at the lip, as most do at the peak of their hike, and then move on to the more rocky area with less of a nice view to rest. Anyway, while we were there resting, 2 Instagram girls got to the top and promptly took over the best view of the lip to take various yoga poses. For at least 10 minutes, families were coming up asking if they could take a picture, but they literally said, "We were here first and we'll be here a while," when asked if they were almost done. We ended up leaving before they were done, but it still boils my blood thinking about it. Story 13. This isn't really outrageous in terms of what they wanted to do in a photo, but I would say 90% of influencers who contact me try to use tagging as their form of payment. Well, I have 100,000 followers, so you're guaranteed to get so much work from this you'd be an idiot to say no. This is word for word what one woman said to me when I politely informed her of my rates. Paying artists an exposure is nothing new. but the level of entitlement I'm seeing these days is off the charts. The only thing I can ever guarantee from these interactions is that they will throw a massive tantrum when I say no, complete with some classic lines like, "Your work isn't even that good. I was trying to do you a favor," etc. One person contacted me saying that she gets paid a certain amount from companies per post. Thus, every post she makes using my photographs should count for that amount of dollars paid to me because, like so many people will see it, you will pretty much be famous. Edit to answer some of the common responses. Yes, I do my best to explain how the process actually works, and that exposure isn't a form of payment, etc. This has varying degrees of success, but a lot of the time they end up paying my rates anyways and say something like, "Never know if you don't ask, right? LOL. No, I don't ever respond with sarcastic or snarky comments. You never know when someone will go off the rails and start bad-mouthing you on their platform. Screenshots are a thing, and word of mouth is a huge part of getting new clients. Yes, it would be immensely satisfying to lay into some of these people, but an out-of-context screenshot with some victim story behind it can be extremely damaging, so it's always better to err on the side of caution. I honestly appreciate all the suggestions for counteroffers and ways of dealing with these people. There are some seriously smart answers here, bravo. I don't let anyone take advantage of me or my business, and managing client expectations is just part of the job. Cheers for all the awesome responses. This was a lot of fun. Story 14. Someone asked me to photograph her entire wedding for a full day, an engagement photo shoot underwater. Since I also do underwater photography, and some honeymoon shots at a different location. All this was supposed to be for exposure. I politely declined, and she reacted in a patronizing way, asking me if I knew who she was and what this opportunity could do for my career. She had around 10,000 fewer followers than I did, and I don't even specialize in wedding photography, as I had pointed out. So it wasn't in my best interest, even if she had millions of followers. Additionally, an influencer asked me to do a nude photo shoot for him for free. I declined but wished him luck. He then sent an inappropriate photo. I reported him. Story 15. I was in New York once, and this girl, who should be in her 20s, approached me and asked me to take her photo. I thought it would be some general request, but to stand up to my pride, I lowered the camera to gain an architectural perspective. Then, when I looked at her, she was standing in the middle of the road, one arm on a car that she must have stopped because the traffic was ongoing, and the other holding a banner that said, "Life." To this day, I have no idea what I just witnessed. Story 16. She asked for $200 per hour with a 3-hour minimum, without any real prior modeling experience, and had conditions that the photos could not be posted anywhere, and that she was going to have them sold exclusively on her Patreon. Story 17. I have a long gray-white beard, which naturally prompts a lot of jokes about looking like Santa Claus. We spent Christmas in Punta Cana this year, and I have this old Hawaiian shirt with reindeer and Christmas designs on it. So, on the afternoon of Christmas Day, I went walking down the beach in my Christmas shirt and was instantly surrounded by all these girls in bikinis wanting to take a selfie with Santa Claus. I was game. It seemed like it was all in good fun, and if a bunch of giggling girls want to sit on my lap and take a picture, who am I to complain? But it got obnoxious really quickly. Each one of them wanted 20 shots from different angles in different poses with different backgrounds and different lighting angles. I couldn't figure out what was going on until one of them mentioned how popular this was going to be on Instagram, that she found out what Santa does to rest after Christmas Eve. After that, it was just kind of irritating, so I refused to do any more photos unless a child asked, which just annoyed the Instagram crowd, which naturally made it even more irritating. I ended up avoiding the beach and pool area for the rest of the week. Edit. Recent photo for credibility. Story 18. Not a photographer personally, but a few of my close friends are. My friend, we'll call her Sarah, is a pretty successful photographer for only being a college student. About a month ago, Sarah and I were meeting up for lunch at our university's food court, and she's fiddling with her cameras, prepping them for a big shoot she has that night, when this very attractive girl walks over and starts chatting us up. She makes a few minutes of casual conversation, mostly inquiring about Sarah's cameras, and then finally asks if she'd be interested in doing a shoot. She immediately throws her pitch, which had to do with modeling some very risque outfits up in the mountains just outside of the city, and then a few photos directly in the center of downtown. Overall, the whole pitch was something that bordered very close to being pornographic in nature. Sarah tells the girl her typical rates and also states that because of the nature of the shoot, she'll have to charge extra as it's not something she typically does or is super comfortable with. The girl's face when Sarah mentioned the price went from enthusiastic to very, "Are you kidding me?" She then butts in and says, "I have over 85,000 Instagram followers. Do you know the kind of exposure working with me would give you? This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance for you." Sarah responds telling her that she's an in-house photographer for 3 of the city's largest concert venues, works as a photographer for the newspaper, and is a highly recommended wedding photographer on top of it all. "I don't work for free." My favorite line she said during this was, "I work with people much more famous than you on an almost daily basis. I've shot photos for Marilyn Manson, Motley Crue, Shania Twain, Post Malone, and a bunch of other musicians that come through and was paid for all of it. Your exposure isn't worth anything to me." After that, the girl got really upset and walked off. Story 19. I work in a camera store and do photography myself. I hear stories about this sort of stuff all the time. Usually, people just ask for model shoots in exchange for exposure, but I've heard and seen stories about people asking for full wedding shoots for exposure. There is a fairly popular story at the moment about a photographer in Chicago. It's not always influencers asking these questions either. Sometimes disrespectful people ask this stuff and then say things like, "Well, if I had that equipment, then we'd be able to get the same results." They just don't have respect for the time that goes into the art form. Story 20. I do documentary film and I had a non-film job in college. I met this lady who was maybe 30 and asked me to do an Instagram video like this. She showed me a professional video shoot done with a green screen, lights, and set. I told her I could probably get pretty close to the quality with my university's equipment, but it would take time to get a crew together and reserve a studio. She told me no, that I should just record it with my phone. I told her that's not what they did for the Instagram video she just showed me, and she said, "It's on Instagram. That means they recorded it with their phone." She dropped it after I mentioned I charge money and wouldn't just do it to be nice. She has about 10 followers, and 3 of them were spam accounts. Edit. I've had 3,000 karma for about 2 years. Story 21. I do photography on the side since I am mostly into film and video, but I have a friend who has an Instagram account as a side business for fun. I told her I would do a photo shoot for her if she helped me with my resume and cover letter. Although she has tons of companies that give her products to review for free, the photo credit she gave me honestly did not lead to any followers on my Instagram. So, anyone who wants exposure for intense work does not actually provide any exposure. In my case, I was the one who brought up the deal, and honestly, I would have done it for free to get out of the house because she is my friend. But that photo credit does not do anything in my experience. Story 22. I do street photography every so often. I was once offered influence credit for pretending to be in shock that I found her in the streets of my town. I would take a bunch of photos of her at the spot and give them to her. This would all be recorded by her, I hope, boyfriend. I wasn't allowed to use the photos myself, and all I would get is a tag at the end of the description. I said no thanks, then snapped a couple of photos of her. She said she would sue me. I said we were on public streets and I'm a hobbyist who doesn't sell. I don't need model waivers. Never heard from her again. Never used photos either. She's not interesting. Story 23. Not a photographer, but one of my acquaintances is a semi-popular influencer. She spends way too much time trying to seem authentic and down to earth. One time at a small party, I did something funny that made a bunch of people laugh. Whatever it wasn't caught on camera, and she forced me to recreate the moment so that she could film it for her Instagram stories. You're not having fun unless you can prove it to your thousands of followers, apparently. Story 24. I paid my photographer for my album cover with cinnamon buns. He insisted that was the payment he wanted. So I've invented a new currency. Did it with the photo editor too, although it was a mix of money and cinnamon buns. Story 25. I have a really close family friend from high school who plays in a local band, and he usually does a pretty good job of getting me on the guest list, whether or not I actually want to take pictures. However, I do bring my camera every time just in case. I usually use the opening bands to dial in my settings and see what angles look good for the stage setup because they didn't even know I was going to be there in the first place. And I'm there because of my friend, so obviously I want anything I give to him to be some of my better work. Sometimes if the other bands notice me walking around and snapping pictures during their set, they'll come find me after the show and ask for some of the pictures. If I manage to get any that look decent, I never have a problem sending them copies of the photos for their social media pages. Some bands even offer to give me a free t-shirt or hat or vinyl of their newest release, which is always appreciated. As with any photo that hasn't been purchased, done for exposure, I place my watermark on the lower right corner of the picture after I'm done editing. It's not obtrusive, it's pretty tasteful in my opinion, and it just ensures people know who took the photo. Sometimes bands can't remember my name or forget to tag me in a post. No big deal, humans make mistakes, I get it. So after this one concert in early 2019, the lead singer of an opening band, one I had never heard of, comes up to me and says, "I saw you taking pictures during our set. Would you mind sending those to us for our Instagram?" I said, "No problem. Give me a few days to import, edit, and upload the photos and I'll email you everything." She followed it up with, "We're on tour right now, so we're pretty hard-pressed for money, but we'd be happy to give you a shout-out on our page and direct bands in the area to look into you for concert photography." I said, "Yeah, that's fine. I already got free admission to the concert through another band, so I'm not super worried about the money. Besides, this is more of a hobby than a job." And we went our separate ways. Fast forward about a week, and I decide to go check their Instagram to see if they had posted anything from that show. And sure enough, they had. However, not only had they not tagged me in the post, but they had completely cropped out the watermark I put on the picture. So much for the exposure, I guess. I reached out to them on Instagram and also commented on the post using my photography profile, not my personal one, and just politely asked them if they'd add my tag to the photo, as not only was it my actual photograph, but it was also my edit. Well, they blocked me. Only on my photography profile, though. I checked their Instagram on my personal, and sure enough, that picture is still on their page, and they hadn't even deleted the comment I made on it saying, "I'm sure it's an honest mistake, but I'd appreciate you giving credit to the photographer who kindly sent you these photos with nothing promised but a shout out." Some people's kids, man.